The M1 Garand became one of the defining firearms of the Second World War, a weapon that earned a reputation for its effectiveness and reliability in nearly every major battle fought by American forces. The conflict as a whole was shaped by a vast collection of technological innovations and devastating weapons used by both the Allies and the Axis. Each nation brought forward designs that would leave a permanent mark on military history. The British employed their dependable 25-pounder field gun, the versatile workhorse of their artillery units, and their Royal Air Force flew the famous Supermarine Spitfire, a fighter that proved decisive in many aerial battles. Alongside it flew the Avro Lancaster bomber, capable of delivering heavy loads of bombs deep into enemy territory, while ground units made use of the Universal Carrier and the Bren light machine gun, both celebrated for their versatility. The Soviet Union unleashed the rugged T-34 tank, so effective in design and performance that it is often regarded as the finest tank of the war. Germany countered with weapons of terrifying power, most notably the 88mm gun, equally efficient in destroying aircraft and armored vehicles, and the fearsome Tiger tanks that dominated battlefields with their armor and firepower. From Japan came the Mitsubishi Zero, a carrier-based fighter that struck fear into opponents during the early years of the Pacific War. The United States, often referred to as the arsenal of democracy, supplied its forces with the Jeep, half-tracks, Sherman tanks, the bazooka rocket launcher, the indispensable C-47 transport plane, and perhaps most importantly, the M1 Garand rifle. The Garand was a semi-automatic gas-operated clip-fed weapon, air-cooled, and designed to provide American infantrymen with unmatched firepower at the time. It was conceived by John C Garand, a French-Canadian engineer, well before the outbreak of war, but it reached widespread issue between 1941 and 1945. Unlike other standard rifles of the era, which were typically bolt-action, the M1 offered a revolutionary advantage. It was the first semi-automatic rifle adopted as the primary weapon of a major army. It was carried by American soldiers in virtually every campaign of the war: the deserts of North Africa, the rocky terrain of Sicily and Italy, the beaches of Normandy, and the hedgerows of France, the forests of Belgium and Holland, the crossing into Germany, and the jungles and islands of the Pacific theater. The rifle fired the .3006 cartridge, fed by an 8-round N-block clip, giving it both range and stopping power. Its semi-automatic action meant a soldier could fire shot after shot simply by pulling the trigger, a far cry from the slower bolt-action rifles used by German, Japanese, and even British troops. A trained rifleman could empty all 8 rounds in roughly 20 seconds and immediately reload without taking his eyes off the enemy. The design allowed for versatility in ammunition as well, accommodating ball rounds, tracers, armor-piercing, cartridges, and incendiary bullets. With the simple addition of an attachment, the rifle could also function as a grenade launcher. Despite weighing nearly 10 pounds, soldiers valued it because of its durability, relative ease of maintenance, and precision. With effective accuracy, reaching out to 500 yards or more, accounts from the front lines consistently praised the M1's battlefield performance. In Europe, one infantryman recalled dropping multiple enemy soldiers in a single engagement thanks to the Garand's rapid fire and power. In the Pacific, Marines described halting enemy charges with devastating effect, one even reporting that as Japanese troops rushed him with fixed bayonets, he brought them down with his Garand, the distinctive metallic ping of the clip, ejecting echoing through the fight as his squad pressed on. In the dense jungles of Asia, where firefights sometimes erupted at point-blank range along narrow trails, the rifle's heavy cartridge was so powerful that it could cut through foliage and even strike multiple enemy soldiers lined up in column. In such environments, a lone American, armed with an M1, could change the outcome of a skirmish, stopping a full squad before they reached striking distance. Praise for the rifle was not limited to soldiers on the ground. Commanders and military officials recognized its reliability and significance. After the brutal fighting on Botan in 1942, reports delivered to the U.S. Ordnance Department highlighted that the M1 continued to perform under extreme combat conditions without jamming, even when subjected to dust, mud, and neglect. Troops reported that the rifle functioned almost continuously, even when it went uncleaned or unlubricated for extended periods. General Douglas MacArthur himself attested to its reliability in the Pacific campaigns, while Lieutenant General George S. Patton, Jr., commander of the U.S. Third Army in Europe, famously declared in 1945 that the M1 Garand was the finest battle implement ever devised. Compared to the Springfield rifle it replaced, Garand was not as elegant in appearance but far more practical, tougher, easier to produce in massive numbers, 3 times faster in its rate of fire, nearly as accurate, and simpler for inexperienced recruits to master in training. Behind this extraordinary weapon was John C Garand, the man whose design transformed infantry warfare. Born on January 1, 1888, on a modest farm in the village of St. Pry south of Montreal, Garand's early life gave little indication of the revolutionary role he would play in military history. At the age of 11, his family relocated to Connecticut, where he left school by 12 to help support the household. He began sweeping floors in a textile mill, but his natural fascination with mechanics soon drew him to the machinery around him. Spending his spare time studying and tinkering, he nurtured a passion for engineering. By the time he was 18, Garand was employed as a machinist. Determined to further his knowledge, he enrolled in correspondence courses that qualified him as a tool and gauge maker. This led to work at the Brown and Sharp Tool Company in Providence, Rhode Island, where he apprenticed as a machine tool designer. There, amid a growing revolution in industrial production, Garand became immersed in the world of precision engineering at a time when the demand for accurate and mass-produced components was at its peak. It was this background and dedication that would eventually culminate in the design of the rifle that bore his name, a weapon destined to change the face of warfare. The rapid changes in American industry at the start of the 20th century placed immense pressure on machine tool manufacturers to adapt. The rise of the automobile industry demanded faster production methods, higher precision, and designs that could be easily manufactured in large numbers. Brown and Sharp, where John Garand worked as a young machinist and apprentice designer, was at the center of this industrial transformation. During his time there, he gained invaluable experience in uniting theoretical design with practical production techniques, a lesson that would stay with him for the rest of his career. The constant drive for efficiency, accuracy, and mass production taught Garand that weapons, like other machines, had to be designed with manufacturing realities in mind. While his formal education had ended early, the environment at Brown and Sharp provided him with the kind of training that could never be learned from books alone. Shaping his later approach to firearm design, Garand's fascination with firearms began in a humble setting. While working for a shooting gallery, he became deeply interested in both the mechanics of guns and the sport of target shooting. He did not simply view firearms as weapons, but as finely crafted machines whose performance could be studied and improved. Reading about the difficulties the U.S. Army had encountered with its small arms during the First World War inspired him to experiment with weapon design himself. His first serious creation was a light machine gun, and when the War Department invited inventors to submit new concepts, Garand's design stood out. By August 1918, the Bureau of Standards entrusted him with developing his prototype, a remarkable accomplishment for a self-taught engineer with little formal background. Within a year and a half, he produced a working model, but the sudden end of the war robbed the project of urgency. The Army shifted its focus away from experimental weapons, yet Garand's efforts did not go unnoticed. He was retained as a consultant engineer, and his name began circulating among experts in the small arms field, marking the beginning of his reputation as a serious innovator. In November 1919, Garand was sent to the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts, an institution with a long and storied history, founded during the American Revolution at the direction of George Washington and Henry Knox. Springfield had produced muskets, cannon, and ammunition for the Continental Army. Over time, it grew into the primary federal center for small arms production, especially after the destruction of the Harper's Ferry Armory during the Civil War. By then, Springfield had become symbolic of America's ability to arm itself on a national scale, and its work was even immortalized in a famous poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Here, Garand would spend his entire professional life, eventually becoming one of its leading figures. His assignment was to create a semi-automatic rifle for the Army, a weapon that would replace the older bolt-action Springfield rifle. He knew that such a weapon had to be both mechanically dependable and suited for mass production, a combination that earlier designs had failed to achieve. Garand quickly realized that the Armory faced serious limitations. During World War I, Springfield had turned out more than 265,000 Model 1903 rifles. But this number had not kept pace with the Army's needs. Rock Island Arsenal had been forced to produce nearly 50,000 more to cover the shortfall. Worse still, many of the rifles manufactured were quickly discarded, a reflection of both outdated facilities and inefficient processes. Despite years of warnings, Springfield had not modernized its production lines, leaving it ill-prepared for the demands of modern warfare. Garand, who was methodical and meticulous in his work, concluded that clinging to the Model 1903 was pointless. Though the rifle was accurate and reliable in combat, it was designed for craftsmen who could afford to spend long hours carefully machining parts. Wartime conditions demanded weapons that could be produced quickly, in massive numbers, by ordinary workers with limited training. He took inspiration from the British M1 917 Enfield, which had been engineered to suit the capabilities of standard factories and unskilled labor. This principle of designing weapons around the realities of production became central to Garand's philosophy. By 1919, he was already sketching concepts for an entirely new rifle. When he became a naturalized U.S. citizen in 1920, He secured a government salary of $33,500 per year, unlike private inventors who might have profited enormously from royalties. Garand's decision tied his fate entirely to the government and ensured that any weapons he created would remain public property. His path forward was long and filled with obstacles. The Ordnance Department's demands were exacting. They required a rifle that could be used by regular infantrymen, cavalry troops, and even tank crews, which meant it had to be durable, versatile, and compact enough for multiple roles. In 1926, the Army issued formal specifications, emphasizing that the new rifle should reuse as many components as possible from the M1 while still firing the standard .3006 cartridge. This was not simply a matter of convenience, but a reflection of stockpiles left over from the First World War, numbering in the millions of rounds. At a time when Congress was cutting defense budgets, the Army had little choice but to rely on existing ammunition stores. General Douglas MacArthur, then Chief of Staff, ordered that the next generation service rifle be chambered for this surplus ammunition, effectively locking Garand and other designers into using the .3006 round as the foundation of their work. This constraint would shape every stage of Garand's efforts during the 1920s and 1930s as he labored to deliver a weapon that met the Army's expectations and could be produced on a national scale. During the opening years of the 1930s, John Garand dedicated himself almost completely to the challenge of creating a rifle that would satisfy the United States Army's requirements. Year after year, he labored, often sacrificing his personal time to sketch new layouts, refine existing ideas, and build working versions that could be tested and improved. Much of this work took place inside the experimental department of the Springfield Armory, where he not only tested his concepts but also imagined new approaches to metalworking and production that would be necessary to bring his vision to life on a large scale. Under his influence, the Watershops complex of the Armory gradually transformed into one of the most sophisticated centers of machining and metallurgy anywhere in the world. By the late 1920s and into the early 1930s, his design steadily matured, until at last, in 1934, he was granted a patent for his semi-automatic rifle. Even though the weapon had been identified as the Army's preferred infantry arm as early as 1932, it was not officially authorized to replace the M1 Springfield until 1936, following a decisive directive from General Douglas MacArthur. What set Garand's rifle apart was its capacity to fire at more than double the rate of the older Springfield, while still maintaining ruggedness and accuracy. Production formally commenced in 1937, and on July 17th of that year, the first completed M1 rifle passed its firing trials with great success. Nevertheless, output was slow in the beginning, and by the outbreak of World War II, the number of rifles in circulation was far too small to fully equip the Army. When Japanese aircraft struck Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the majority of us, soldiers and Marines, were still carrying bolt-action. This shortfall was quickly addressed. However, as Springfield and other facilities dramatically accelerated their manufacturing programs. By the end of the war in 1945, Springfield Armory alone had produced approximately 4.5 million M1 rifles, and 3 additional companies under government contract contributed another million, ensuring that the Garand became the backbone of American infantry firepower. Prior to the war, a number of weapons experts expressed doubt that a semi-automatic service rifle could ever equal the accuracy or reliability of traditional bolt-action arms. Yet in combat, these reservations proved unfounded. When compared to the British Leonfield, the German Mauser, the Russian Mosin-Nagant, and other bolt-action rifles of the period, the M1 demonstrated clear superiority in its ability to deliver rapid, sustained fire without sacrificing precision. It was simple to disassemble and maintain in the field. It continued to operate under extreme stress and rough treatment, and it gave the individual rifleman the ability to unleash a volume of fire far beyond what enemies could match with their manually operated rifles. The environments in which the M1 served testified to its resilience. It fired reliably in the burning deserts of North Africa, the freezing mud of Italian winters, the fog-wrapped Aleutian Islands, the dense jungles and swamps of Guadalcanal and New Guinea, the scorching coral atolls of Tarawa and Okinawa, and the snow and ice of the Ardennes. German semi-automatic rifles such as the Guhar 43 and the Soviet SVT-40, while innovative, never reached the same standard of ruggedness or user-friendliness, and Japanese attempts to produce a semi-automatic design never advanced beyond the prototype stage. The British even examined the Garand as a possible replacement for their long-serving Leonfield, but eventually decided not to adopt it. For more than 20 years, however, the M1 Garand remained an essential element of the US military arsenal. It accompanied American troops into every theater of combat and was used in every type of environment and in every scale of battle. From massive offensives to small skirmishes, commanders praised it as a decisive factor that gave American an edge over their opponents. Its service extended beyond World War II into the Korean War of 1950 to 1953. and it even saw use during the early years of the Vietnam conflict. Veterans who had carried it often spoke of it with affection and respect. One World War II sergeant, reflecting on his experiences decades later, described it simply as a true soldier's weapon. The production story of the rifle was equally significant. In the late 1930s and through the war years, Springfield Armory dramatically increased its output, in line with the broader surge of American wartime industry. As in many other factories across the country, women stepped forward to take on roles in the ordnance plants, becoming the majority of the workforce by 1943. At Springfield, nearly 70% of the employees were women, often referred to as WOWs or women ordnance workers. They learned to operate heavy machinery, perform precision tasks, and assemble the very rifles that their husbands, fathers, sons, and brothers would carry across distant battlefields. Their labor and dedication were woven into the story of the Garand just as surely as Garand's own genius, making the M1 not just a triumph of design but also a symbol of national effort during a time of global crisis. The Springfield Armory, beyond serving as a center of military production, became a place where people of many backgrounds, including a large number of African Americans, found stable employment during the war years. When hostilities in Europe began in September 1939, the United States sought to expand its small arms production capacity, and Winchester, Repeating Arms Company of New Haven, Connecticut, was granted a contract to produce M1 rifles. Production began in 1941 and continued until 1945, when Winchester concluded its deliveries. Despite frequent jokes and complaints from soldiers about the Garand being heavy, the rifle earned a reputation for dependable performance in every theater of war. Whether it was carried across the sands of North Africa, the islands of the Pacific, or the frozen battlefields of Europe, it proved itself to be not merely reliable but decisive, often meaning survival for soldiers locked in close combat. And it became one of the key factors behind the eventual Allied victory over Germany, Italy, and Japan. Its impact was so profound that both allies and adversaries were driven to accelerate the development of their own semi-automatic and automatic rifles in an attempt to close the gap in firepower. For his tireless work at Springfield Armory, John Garand was honored with two of the highest civilian recognitions of the time, the Medal for Meritorious Service in 1941 and the Medal for Merit in 1944. Yet in spite of his recognition, Garand personally gained little in financial reward. He willingly assigned his patents to the U.S. government, collected only his modest civil service salary, and never received royalties for the weapon that had changed modern warfare. Congress at one point considered awarding him a sum to show national appreciation, but the measure failed to pass. After the war, the M1 inventory was refurbished and repaired in large numbers to extend their service life, and the outbreak of the Korean War further highlighted the rifle's value. The Defense Department decided that additional rifles were necessary, and new production contracts were awarded to International Harvester in Evansville, Indiana, and to Harrington and Richardson in Worcester, Massachusetts. Between 1953 and 1956, these two firms manufactured 500,000 additional Garand rifles. Beyond American use, the M1 was adopted by several NATO member states and allied countries after 1948. In Italy, Beretta acquired the tooling originally made by Winchester and built around 100,000 Garands, solidifying the weapon's international reach. Specialized variants were also developed. In 1951, the Marine Corps officially adopted the M1C sniper model equipped with a telescopic sight, while the Navy modified Garands to chamber the new 7.62 mm NATO cartridge. Although the M1 remained reliable and effective, by 1957 it was formally replaced in U.S. service by the M14, a select-fire weapon with a detachable 20-round magazine. Fully loaded, the M14 weighed about the same as a loaded M1, but it offered automatic fire capability in addition to semi-automatic operation. Even so, many veterans defended the M1 as the superior rifle. Hopkins, a soldier who had carried the weapon, remarked that its extra weight was an advantage in extreme situations, because in the chaos of close-quarters combat, the Garand could double as an effective blunt weapon, something later rifles like the M16 could not replicate, according to him and many others who had experienced both World War II and the Korean conflict. The Garand was still the finest infantry rifle of its time, unmatched in its blend of ruggedness, accuracy, and firepower. Long after it was officially retired, the Garand remained in service with National Guard units and with the armed forces of many nations, including Greece, Denmark, Turkey, Italy, Chile, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Tunisia. The Garand also became renowned outside of combat for its balance and handling qualities, making it a preferred rifle for precision drill displays. Soldiers who specialized in ceremonial drill praised its sleek profile and the way it could be spun, tossed, and caught with impressive flair. Hopkins recalled being taught by a veteran from West Virginia who displayed astonishing skill. forming a color guard and showing that the rifle was perfectly suited to ceremonial use. Some instructors still preferred the older Springfield 1903 for intricate drill motions because of its balance, yet the Garand became the mainstay for many drill teams. Its legacy extended far beyond active service. It continued to be used by Reserve Officer Training Corps units, the Marine Corps Silent Drill Platoon, and even the Norwegian Royal Guard, all of which highlighted its enduring symbolic value as well as its functional excellence. After his remarkable contribution, Garand stayed on at Springfield Armory as a consultant. He believed that some form of lasting compensation would eventually be granted to him. But despite his service and his invention's decisive role in the nation's history, no financial prize was ever awarded. He retired in 1953 and lived quietly until his passing in Springfield on February 16, 1974, at the age of 80. Today, his rifle is highly valued by both collectors and shooters. According to firearm historian Tom Laneline, the civilian marksmanship program searches across the globe to recover Garands and return them to American soil, offering both veterans and enthusiasts the chance to own a piece of history. Even as modern reproductions use contemporary materials, the M1 Garand continues to embody the craftsmanship, durability, and ingenuity that defined its era. It is instantly recognizable at parades, gun shows, and shooting ranges, not only as a weapon but as a lasting emblem of American strength. Veterans who carried it in battle often repeat the same sentiment. The Garand was more than just a rifle. It was truly a